In today's reading lesson, we'll talk about crafting a reading life. The mentor text I'm going to share with you is called When Jessie Came Across the Sea. It's by Amy Hest and it's illustrated by P.J. Lynch. We all come to our reading community with different interests, identities, and strengths as readers. Who we are affects what we read. Our reading lives are made up of different kinds of texts, various purposes for reading, and a range of ways that we carve out reading time. What we read fills our reading baskets, so to speak. Something we're going to pay attention to this year is the variety in our reading baskets or book boxes. One way that we create variety is by reading across genres. By reading different genres, we expand our schema, or what we already know grows. And we also grow as a reader, amongst many other things. So let's get started. Here's what you'll need for this read aloud today. You'll need your reading notebook, a pencil, and your school-wide launch notebook. Okay, let's get started. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be reading a book by Amy Hest, and she's an author who writes in a variety of genres. This particular text is historical fiction. Historical fiction stories are based on historical time periods. As we read historical fiction, these are the things that we want to consider. What am I learning about the time period? As well as questions about the characters and events. Today, you're going to stop and jot to pay attention to your thoughts, all while learning about Jessie's incredible voyage. Let's get started. Once in a poor village far from here, there was a very small house with a slanting roof and a table with a fine lace cloth. A pot-bellied stove warmed this place in winter and warmed thin soup. Jessie lived in that house with grandmother. They had one skinny cow, Miss Minnie, and a patch of garden. Carrots came up here and there, and sometimes a potato. Long ago, when Jessie was a baby, her parents died. Jessie kept her mother's wedding band, though in a tiny silver box with a tiny lace lining. From time to time, she tried it on. I wrote down the title of today's story on the page where I'll be putting my stop and jot notes. Now would be a great time to pause the video to do the same. I have some stop and jot notes that I'm going to add here. Let's talk about those. I learned a lot in the first page. So I think that this story takes place a long time ago. And the reason I think that is because there's a farm and it just looks in the pictures that the home is in a location that is far from where we live. So I wrote that down as well. And I also wrote that Jessie lives with her grandma because the author did tell us that in the story. And I think that it is important because we know that her parents did die. So maybe that is something that we would have written it as well. Now remember, your stop and jot notes could be slightly different from mine. My thoughts and feelings and questions might be different than ones you have. So you might have more or maybe slightly less. But the things that I'm writing down are going to be helpful to my understanding of the text. In the morning, when the village boys went to the rabbi for lessons, Jessie went too. Grandmother insisted. At night, after supper, Jessie read out loud. She practiced her letters by the fire. Grandmother sewed lace. The coins she earned were dropped in a jar on the table. Now you read, Grandmother, and copy my good letters. Jessie liked being teacher. Me? Learn to read and write? Grandmother scoffed. Sometime, you never know, you may want to read some things, Jessie said. You may want to write. Grandmother showed Jessie how to sew lace, but Jessie stuck herself often. Why do I have to learn? She cried. Sometime, you never know, you may want to sew some things, Grandmother answered. You may want to earn some money. I think I'm going to stop and jot that Jessie wants grandmother to learn to read and write, and grandmother wants Jessie to learn to sew. This might be important for later. One evening toward the end of summer, the rabbi called the people of the village to synagogue. "The news from America is sad," said the rabbi. My good brother Mordecai has left this world." The villagers sighed and shook their heads. "Rest in peace," they said. "Shortly before he died, my Mordecai sent me a ticket to America." The rabbi paused. "He wanted me to join him there." "America, the promised land," the voices rose as one. "But alas," the rabbi sighed, "I am the rabbi. How do I leave this village? How do I quit my people?" He threw up his hands. "Someone else must go in my place. Someone of my choosing." What are your questions or thoughts? Let's take a moment to pause and think about this for a minute and discuss. Here are some of my thoughts and ideas. So my first question was, what is a rabbi? I actually know what a rabbi is, but I thought that if you don't have schema on this, this is something that you'd most definitely want to write down because it would be a part of the story where you might be confused. I know that a rabbi is a Jewish religious leader, and I would end up writing that down once I investigated and learned that. And then the other thing I wrote down is I wonder how the rabbi, he, will decide who goes to America. I know the story is called When Jessie Came Across the Sea, but maybe she came across the sea to be in America after someone else was sent. I don't know. So I'm just going to write that down because I'm curious. Later that night, many villagers came to the rabbi's house. "Rabbi, listen to reason. I must go to America, for I am strong." "Rabbi, listen to good sense. I must go to America, for I am smart." "Rabbi, listen to logic. I must go to America, for I am brave." The rabbi listened. How they boast and brag. He thought, "Tonight I shall seek guidance from the Almighty," he told the villagers. "You go home. Tomorrow I will choose." So let's just take a moment and reflect on the fact that this is written, it's historical fiction. So this genre is from a long time ago. So some of the things that occur in this story or events that occur are definitely not going to happen during the time that we live in, the present day. So we always have to think about how the story, how our interpretation of the story is affected by when it took place. Early the next morning, Jessie and grandmother had a caller. "I have decided," announced the rabbi. "Jessie will go to America. My brother's widow has a dress shop in New York City. Her name is Kay, and Jessie can help with the sewing. She will comfort the good lady." Jessie's hands started to shake. America? So far away from grandmother? She bit her lip, for she must not cry in front of the rabbi. "Don't make me go," she thought. "You know best," grandmother spoke quietly to the rabbi. Oh, but her heart was breaking. Dear Jessie alone on a ship to America? Grandmother's heart said one thing, but her head said another. Jessie must go. Wow. Well, I stopped and jotted here. I wrote I would be terrified to travel alone. But it doesn't seem strange for this era. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Let's talk about them. A week passed quickly, then 2 more, as grandmother prepared Jessie for her journey. The morning the ship went to sail, it rained so hard there was no telling where the sky met the sea. "America! Good things await you there," grandmother had promised. Jessie stood at the rail, holding her hat against the wind and the rain. At her feet was a small trunk packed with a few simple clothes and layers of lace. In Jessie's pocket was the tiny silver box with a tiny lace lining. But her mother's wedding band was not inside. "Keep it safe for me, grandmother," she had whispered as they kissed goodbye. "Grandmother," she called, but the boat slipped away from the dock, then into the channel and on toward the sea. Umbrellas faded in the mist. Rain pelted Jessie's face. It slid down the back of her collar. I think Jessie wants her grandmother to keep her mother's ring safe because the trip will be dangerous and she's afraid she might not survive it. I'm definitely going to jot this down in my stop and jot notes. Later, she sat on her trunk and cried. Passengers pitied the girl with the auburn hair and ginger-colored freckles. But what could they do? Crammed together and fearful, speaking strange languages, huddling close to keep warm. What could they do for Jessie? The ship sailed west for many days. At first, it was stormy. Jessie lay curled on a mat, too ill to eat, too ill to sleep. She thought about grandmother in the hut with the slanting roof, eating her soup alone. On the fourth morning, the sun came up and the passengers dried out. They played cards and sang, and sometimes they argued. But mostly they talked, swapping stories and dreams. Dreams of America, where the streets were paved with gold. America, land of plenty. Jessie began sewing to pass the time. Just to touch the soft lace was like touching grandmother again. A little girl with almond eyes climbed on Jessie's lap. They sang and played finger games. Then Jessie sewed lace, a tiny heart pocket for the girl's plain dress. Miss Almond Eyes danced. An old woman came along in a tattered coat. Jessie sewed lace, a collar, and cuffs, and soon that coat was grand. Wow, Jessie uses the skills that her grandmother taught her to make her way on the ship. I think that's remarkable. I'm going to jot that down. Here are my stop and jot notes that I jotted down. Now would be a great time to share yours with me. A boy named Lou, he was a shoemaker's son, watched as Jessie sewed lace. "How do you do?" he asked, tipping his hat. Jessie smiled. Lou took patches of leather from his splintered crate. He stitched shoes for a baby who cried when his mother put them on his fat baby feet. Later, Lou and Jessie walked on the deck and talked. They shared black bread as the ship rolled and pitched in the wide sea. I wonder if they'll end up staying connected after they get to America. What are your thoughts? On a fine fall day, they sailed past the Statue of Liberty. America! No one swapped stories or argued. Babies hushed. Even the oldest passengers and the most seasick stood against the rail. America. And there it was, New York City, with those tall, tall buildings that touched the sky. Grandmother, Jessie thought, if only you could see what I see now. Wow. I feel like I can relate to this as well. Have you ever been somewhere and just been so astonished by what you see? Imagine this is like a new world for her. This is a new country that she's never been. And these giant buildings, as you can see the Statue of Liberty here, this is amazing. The ship docked at Ellis Island. Then papers. Wait online, inspections. Wait online, papers. Wait online, questions. What is your name? Jessie. What is your age? 13. Are you married? No. What is your occupation? I sew lace. Can you read and write? Yes. Are you ill? No. Jessie, a woman with bright hair burst through the crowd. You may call me Cousin Kay. She had a soft, sweet voice and gave Jessie a hug. Where is Lou? Jessie wondered. As Cousin Kay talked on, I forgot to say goodbye. I think it's sad that Jessie forgot to say goodbye. I wonder if she'll ever see Lou again. Cousin Kay lived on the Lower East Side. Her house was 3 flights up. There was a bathtub in the kitchen, a dress shop in the parlor. Dear grandmother, I miss you. Cousin Kay takes me all around the city. I wish you could see the push carts and shops and the trolleys speeding by. But there are too many people in America, and the streets are not gold. There are no cows. Cousin Kay bought me a pickle from a barrel. Tomorrow, I begin to sew for her. Love, Jessie. Jessie chose the yellow chair near the window in the parlor. The light was good for sewing there, and she could see the street. Best of all, Jessie liked to sew lace. A collar, cuffs, a delicate sash. Every Friday, Cousin Kay gave 3 coins to Jessie, who dropped all 3 in a jar. So now I want to jot down what I'm thinking as well. What are your thoughts? One afternoon, just for the fun of it, Jessie pinned a lace bodice to a plain white dress on the cutting board. She pinned lace to the sleeves. "What a beautiful bride's dress that would be," said Cousin Kay. Miss Emily Levy was browsing in the shop that very day. "Well, I'm getting married. Can this dress be for me?" The wedding dress was lovely, so lovely that Emily's cousin, Miss Rachel Katz, wanted one just like it for her wedding day. Before long, brides were filling up Cousin Kay's parlor. "You must go to school," said Cousin Kay one day. "Everyone in America speaks English. My Jessie will speak it too." So in the morning, Jessie went to school. A, apple. B, boy. C, carrot. This English was hard. "Dear grandmother, I miss you more than ever. There's a library here with rows of books. I want to read them all. On Sundays, I take long walks on the city streets and don't get lost anymore. There are flowers in the park. Love, Jessie." Jessie learned more and more English. She sewed beautiful lace, and so 3 years passed. She was a young lady now, 16. On an icy cold Sunday in March, Jessie walked up Fifth Avenue, then into the park, where the trees were covered with new snow. Sleds crisscrossed the hills. Jessie sat on a bench and watched a young man as the wind whipped up and blew his hat off. She laughed out loud. The young man turned. "Lou!" Jessie couldn't believe her eyes. Lou, her friend from the ship. Jessie waved. And Lou, the shoemaker's son, waved back. He would have tipped his hat, but it was far away. The next Sunday, they met again on the bench in the park, and the Sunday after that. "Dear grandmother, I have a special friend. He makes good, strong shoes from patches of leather. His name is Lou. You will like him. Grandmother, I promise. Love, Jessie." One evening, Jessie met Lou's parents, his brother, and his 3 sisters. She brought a basket of bread with a lace cloth. The 2 littlest sisters cried when she left. "Marry me?" asked Lou. On the stairs outside his house. "Soon." Jessie smiled and held his hand. Wow, how exciting. Let's stop and jot some of our thinking and share here. This would be a great place to pause. Days passed and weeks. Jessie sewed lace early and late. Months went by. Jessie sewed and sewed. And then one day the jar was filled with coins. She brought it to a man who sold tickets to America. "I need a ticket for grandmother," she said. Every day, Jessie rushed down 3 flights of stairs to the mailbox. The letter came. Finally, on a breezy day. The handwriting was shaky, but Jessie knew grandmother had written every word herself. "Dear Jessie, I sewed the ticket to the lining of my coat. I say goodbye to this village. The rabbi is taking Miss Minnie. Your loving grandmother." The morning her ship arrived in New York Harbor, it rained so hard there was no telling where the sky met the sea. Grandmother was older than Jessie remembered, and much more frail. They held each other for a long time. "I've brought something for you," grandmother whispered, "from across the sea." With that, she slipped Jessie's mother's wedding band into Jessie's hand. Then they went home, for there was going to be a wedding. Wow, what a great story. I have so many thoughts running through my mind. I'd love to share our thinking together. Now that we're finished, I'm going to write one last note about my thinking. At the end of a book, I often ask myself, what do I think about the story as a whole? In other words, what ideas am I left thinking about? I want you to take a moment and reflect. And then I'd like to write these thoughts down of what we're thinking now that the story is over. We're going to put everything together. I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas. What I wrote down was that Jessie's bravery and her grandmother's wisdom really helped them have a new life. What were your thoughts?